One thing I've always found interesting about fighting games is how, in nearly all of them, they make the decision to have each character originate from a different country. I always try to know what countries each fighting game character is from, and usually it's the first bit of juicy lore I remember about each character. Why do I spend so much time obsessing over such useless details? I don't know. I just think it's neat how the trope of warriors from all over the globe is so prevalent within the genre, and how fighting game developers choose to represent countries with characters. It's fascinating to see how martial arts or traditions of a country can be shown through these characters, and as both the geography and fighting game nerd, I just like how fighting games do this, especially considering the wide appeal of fighting games mean people from all over the world can enjoy and play them. One thing I noticed is how a lot of fighting games have commonalities in terms of which countries are represented and how they do this. Before I really get into it though, to address the elephant in the room, some of the ways countries are represented can fall into stereotypes about these countries and its people, which can be harmful sometimes given the origin of the stereotypes and the way they were and still are used to hurt people. I don't think any fighting game's depiction of other cultures are directly malicious, and ultimately it should be up to different cultures to decide if these depictions are offensive or not. As a white guy, I can still recognize if something is a stereotype and call it out for it if it's genuinely lazy writing, but I think the cultures the character is supposed to be a part of should be the final authority on if it's offensive or not. Anyways, the world of martial arts is a very diverse one, and so I thought I'd take a look at how characters of different cultures are represented in 3 different popular fighting game series to see how they've been done in the past and how their martial arts work in video games. It's a topic I find fascinating, and I hope at least some other people do as well since you're watching this video. With that said, I want to start with the series that basically started the concept of World Warriors, Street Fighter. Just before I start though, I won't talk about the Street Fighter EX series. I consider that more of its own thing. I'm only discussing the mainline entries here. The original Street Fighter, from what I can tell, is the first fighting game to feature characters from all over the globe. The tournament in the original 1987 game takes you to Japan, the United States, England, China, and Thailand, all with 2 opponents for each. Thailand might seem like an unexpected choice for the last round, but it's actually quite common in fighting games due to how well known the martial art Muay Thai is, which comes from the country. Anyways, Japan is where Ryu, the protagonist of the series, comes from, as well as his master, his master's master, and his master's evil brother Akuma, one of the reoccurring villains of the series. Ryu is basically the strong, stoic type and uses Shotokan karate as his main martial art form. Later on in the series, we get some sumo wrestlers, some ninjas, and some schoolgirls to join the fight from Japan. You know, Japan stuff. Out of this bunch, Sakura is probably the most popular, which makes sense. She is a pretty cool character after all. The sumo wrestler E Honda is also a pretty well-known character from Japan. He is significantly less developed than Sakura. Liking sumo and thinking it's the best sport in the world is basically his only personality trait. But okay, they can't all be winners. The United States have a lot of representation in Street Fighter 2. Ryu's rival Ken is from here, and so is Guile. The perfect representation of how Japanese developers make Americans. You know what? I don't think it's too far off. Balrog, one of the villains of the series, is American too, and he is a boxer, so a lot of boxer tropes are put into him. Well, negative tropes at least. He isn't exactly supposed to be a good guy. After that, there are a lot of characters who come from the USA, most notably Guile's partner Charlie, Guy and Cody, who are guest characters from the Final Fight series, and Alex and Luke, the intended protagonists of Street Fighter 3 and 6 respectively, showing that even though these games are Japanese, America usually finds its way to have a really important presence anyways. China is easily the next most represented country in the games after those 3, with Chun-Li being the most famous example. She practices Kung Fu, and so do most other characters who originate from China, in Street Fighter and fighting games in general. Originating from Super Street Fighter 2 is Fei Long, who was the first in a fighting game archetype I like to call Bruce Lee clones, where he's just Bruce Lee. They don't call him that, but it's so unsubtle. He's even a movie star. Street Fighter is not the only fighting game to essentially just copy over a celebrity in it. or even with Bruce Lee. Heck, every fighting game I'm talking about today has a Bruce Lee clone. So, yeah. Fei Long grew up in Hong Kong specifically, which is where a lot of Chinese Street Fighter characters hail from, and Bruce Lee. It's also unconfirmed, but highly likely from a leak, that the villain of Street Fighter 6 will come from China as well. Speaking of villains, Muay Thai villain Sagat was the main villain of the first Street Fighter, and he comes from Thailand along with his right-hand man Adon. You can bet this dude makes the martial art look badass. Anyways, the last location from the original Street Fighter was the UK, which is most famous for the character of Cammy, but also has Eagle, the boxer Dudley, perfect examples of the archetypical classy Englishman, and Birdie, the representation of what British people are truly like. Well, except for his teeth. Why are his teeth so clean? Well, after that came the Street Fighter II series, which propelled the series and fighting game genre into the mainstream and gave us even more countries through characters. From the Soviet Union, we have Zangief, a wrestler who first worked directly for and danced with the Soviet government, but later on in the series just became a guy obsessed with showing the world the power of wrestling. The archetypical Russian, in case you couldn't tell. The Street Fighter 3 games gave us Necro and 12, two androids who were created in Russia, and one of the characters confirmed for Street Fighter 6 is JP, a Russian who fights with Bartitsu, which is an early English form of mixed martial arts known for being used in Victorian times by gentlemanly people. Man, I'm excited to play as this dude. He's probably a bad guy, which would make him the second most evil person named JP. Anyways, we also have India, which only has one character in the mainline games, Dulcim, a noble warrior who hates violence and fights for peace. He can do things like stretch his limbs and breathe fire with the power of yoga. And from Brazil, we have Blanca, a mutant beastman who fights with electricity, and Sean and Laura, who are a pair that fight with Matsuda Jiu-Jitsu, which is a fictional martial art based on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Well, Sean mostly just copies Ken, but whatever. Brazil is a pretty popular location for fighting game characters to be from, since it has a few martial arts of its own, and whenever they want someone to be from South America, most of the time they'll pick Brazil since it's the most popular and well-known country in South America. We also have Spain, where the evil bullfighter who attacks with the claw of Vega is from, and Mexico, which gives us T-Hawk, a Native American who fights with Thunderfoot martial arts, a fictional style based on swooping attacks, and El Fuerte, who is a luchador, as well as a chef, which is how he has attack names such as Flying Nachos, Habanero Dash, and Enchilada Jump. He's also voiced by the same dude who voices Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in Japanese, so do with that information what you will. Anyways, the final original country in Street Fighter 2 is what I like to call a unique country for the Street Fighter series. This means that from what I have found in my extensive research into this incredibly niche topic of fighting game nationalities, I could not find any other characters who come from this country. And that is Jamaica and a dude named DJ. DJ is a musical artist who is constantly smiling. He dances and fights with kickboxing. I'm actually pretty surprised no other fighting game characters come from Jamaica. Moving on, we have the series that was a prequel to the Street Fighter 2 games, Street Fighter Alpha 1, 2, and 3. These three games only gave us two new countries, Italy and Germany. What you need to know about Italy is that everyone from the main Street Fighter games who comes from Italy is a hot woman, and from Germany we have Junie and Julie, two brainwashed servants of the series' main villain M. Bison. But by the way, his nationality is unknown, which is why I haven't talked about him so far. One of the movies says he's Irish, but that makes no sense, and I'm not counting that as canon. Anyways, we also have Hugo, who's a professional wrestler based on a combination of Andre the Giant and Giant Silva, both of which are wrestlers, and none of which are German. So basically none of the Germans really need to be German. You know, Julie and Junie have basically no connection to the country, besides their names being German for the months June and July. After the Alpha games comes Street Fighter 3, with a couple more countries introduced into the fray. From the African country of Kenya, we have Elena, a happy-go-lucky girl who likes nature, making friends, and fights with a Brazilian martial art called capoeira, which involves dancing and constantly being in motion while fighting. We also have a character from France, Ratatouille. He is kind of like overly edgy, sort of a ripoff of Iori from the King of Fighters games. He does have a unique fighting style though, with Savate, a French kickboxing style, which is known for only allowing kicks with the foot, no shins like Muay Thai, and is one of the few types of kickboxing where practitioners wear shoes most of the time. Also, this guy has a dead sister preserved in a block of ice. Anyways, France has a 2-for-1 with misses, because in Street Fighter 4 we have Abel, a character whose fighting style isn't bad, but is so boring personality-wise. Cannot tell you a single thing I remembered about this character's personality. Okay, well, I looked it up. He likes dogs, bears, soft things, and Fei Long's films. And he hates oysters because they once gave him food poisoning. Okay, that's a deep character. It does look like the third time will be a charm, though, because we're getting a new French character in Street Fighter 6. And damn, just look at her. Despite having one of the most boring characters in the series, Street Fighter 4 gave us some pretty cool new characters whose names don't rhyme with Schmabel, and a couple of them come from new countries. From Turkey, there's Hakan. He fights with Turkish oil wrestling, and his gimmick is that he can oil himself up more and more as the fight goes on. We also have Juri, an extremely popular villain who comes from South Korea and fights with Taekwondo. I'm surprised it took until Street Fighter 4 to get someone from South Korea, because it's a very popular location for fighting games. Actually, I stand corrected. It's not Street Fighter 4. We got a Taekwondo user. Juri will always be the second Taekwondo user in the series, thanks to Shin from Street Fighter Online, the Most Generation. Truly the greatest fighting game of all time. Even Obama's in it. I'm not lying right now. Finally, Street Fighter V. The base game gives us Rashid, who comes from an unknown Arabian country, which can be assumed to be the UAE, since that's where his stage is located. He fights by summoning wind and using parkour, and in universe he's a famous influencer. After this, Street Fighter V gives us the most important country it has ever introduced in the series. Canada, my homeland. It's been over 25 years, but finally it's getting representation. Who is the character chosen to represent it? This guy. Abigail from Final Fight. Could be worse, I guess. I mean, he's also voiced by the guy who voices Persona 5 Joker, which is hilarious because, I mean, look at him. Finally, from Egypt is Manat, the apprentice of Rose, the fortune teller from before, who I never properly explained because, she is one of the characters from Italy. She fights with soul power and with a crystal ball, and was voiced by the person who plays Futaba Sakura in Persona 5. What is going on? So, Street Fighter as a series was basically what started the trend of characters having nationalities in the first place, because it was the first to have characters from all over the world gathered in one place. But there's still some other games that took a different approach in representing countries and all the traditions associated with them. So, let's take a look at another one of my favorite fighting games, one that you probably could have guessed based on my Bruce Lee clones comment. It's Tekken. Tekken's story is primarily focused on the conflicts between members of the Mishima clan, meaning lots of characters are part of the Mishima family, which happens to be from Japan. So, lots of characters come from Japan. Most Mishimas practice a type of karate known as Mishima style, which was founded by Jinpachi Mishima, the father of Heihachi, the main villain of the series. In Tekken 2, we are introduced to Jun, who marries into the Mishima family, and in Tekken 3, we get her son Jin, who fights with a combination of Mishima-style karate and Kazuma style, which Jun uses. Then, in Tekken 5, we're introduced to Jin's cousin Asuka, who fights with that Kazuma style. This is honestly really cool, and this way of telling stories about characters and their personalities through fighting styles is one of the things I really like about Tekken. Some other characters from Japan include Gon Ryu, a sumo wrestler who's like E Honda, but he has inappropriate feelings to someone way younger than him. Yoshimitsu and Kunimitsu, who are a samurai and ninja respectively, so they carry a lot of tropes associated with those archetypes. Except Yoshimitsu's maybe an alien? I don't know. There's Mokujin, a dummy made from wood who copies other people's abilities, and Kuma, a bear. Anyways, there's still plenty of characters from other countries than Japan, such as the United States, where we have our Bruce Lee clone, Martial Law, and his son Forrest Law, who was intended to replace him, but they kind of just forgot about him. Slightly more subtle of a clone this time, given he's not really a movie star. There's also his best friend Paul Phoenix, who's from America. Paul is a biker who fights with a form of judo, and is canonically one of the strongest characters in the series, even if he gets treated like a joke sometimes. Michelle Chang and her daughter Julia are Native Americans who are of Chinese descent and fight with Chinese styles of wrestling. Also from America are Bruce, a kickboxer and mercenary, and Brian, also a kickboxer, and an evil cyborg, proving that America can produce some quality bad guys. Finally, we got two characters who are some of the greatest characters in all this series. Bob, a fat American trucker who gets self-conscious about losing weight, which is one of the most accurate Americans ever. They must have had to move to America and live there for like at least 2 years or so to get that much accuracy in one character. And Leroy Smith, an old man from New York who fights with a Chinese martial art called Wing Chun, and a dog. Moving along to Russia, the Jack line of robots created by a man named Dr. Boskanovich, also from Russia. He also has a daughter named Elisa, who he made an android to resemble after she passed away. And then there's Dragunov. He fights with a Russian martial art called Sambo, a mixed martial art invented by the Soviets in the 1920s, where the aim is basically to break as many arms as possible. Dragunov's in the military, and Russian, so it fits. From Mexico, there's King. Like El Fuerte, he's a luchador, with the difference being that he wears a tiger mask, because this is Tekken, and he's raising money for an orphanage. There's also Armor King, who started as King's rival and enemy, but then they became friends until Armor King was killed, then replaced by Armor King 2. The original King died too at some point. Yeah, the King story's a telenovela, that's for sure. The characters of Nina and Anna Williams are assassins. They come from Ireland. And then we have some characters from China in the original Tekken. Yeah, you probably could have guessed there's someone from China, given I've talked about like 2 people before who fight with Chinese martial arts. In the first game, we have Wang Jinrei, an old man who fights with a style called Yin Yu Li He Quan, which is also the style Julia and Michelle Chang use. They don't have any relation to Wang, though, from what we know at least so far. There are also lots of other characters who come from China, including Li Chaolan, an orphan who was adopted into the Mishima family, Lei Wulong, a cop who's able to change his stances he uses to give him different moves, which is known as a stance fighter. He's also a Jackie Chan clone, of course. Zhao Yu, a schoolgirl who's a Heihachi simp, then the Jin Kazuma simp. She also has a pet panda, comes from China obviously, because of course that's a playable character. And Feng Wei. He's a villain obsessed with purging the weak, and he fights with a fictional style called God Fist style. After this, we have Tekken 2, which gives us characters from Australia and South Korea. I'll let you guess what character comes from Australia. Yeah, it's a kangaroo. We also have Craig Marduk from Australia. He's a wrestler who fights with Vale Tudo, a fighting style from Brazil that has next to no rules. It's basically just you beat them up however you want. He's a villain, and he's involved in the King telenovela, being the one who originally killed Armor King, but then becomes an ally of King, as he forgives him. The character from South Korea is named Baek Do-san. Like pretty much every other South Korean in fighting games, he uses Taekwondo. He even has an apprentice named Hwarang, who debuts in Tekken 3, and is also a Taekwondo user. He's the rival of the series protagonist Jin. He joined and quit the military at one point, and then led a resistance against Jin in World War III at the age of 21. I'm sorry, I know I'm supposed to be talking about these characters' nationalities, how they affect them and their fighting styles, but Tekken lore just kind of catches me off guard sometimes. Anyways, Tekken 3 was the entry in the series that practically reinvented the franchise with the addition of Jin Kazuma. It also introduced one of the most popular characters in this series, whose fighting style is one of the main reasons he's so popular, Eddie Gordo. He comes from Brazil. Eddie fights with capoeira, which, if you remember, is the style Elena uses in Street Fighter 3. He's much more famous for it, though, because it's just animated better. The way he's constantly in motion, his attacks flow so well and move so seamlessly, has never been done before in a fighting game, 2D or 3D, and I'm sure there are lots of people who learn this cool martial arts style just because of him. Yet you can't deny how cool this character is. In Tekken 4, Christy was introduced. She's also from Brazil and uses capoeira. And then there's Katarina Alves, also coming from Brazil, who fights with Savate, just like Ratatouille from Street Fighter. Surprisingly, Tekken actually hasn't had a character from France yet. The closest is Lily de Rochefort, who comes from Monaco. That would have been a perfect segue into talking about her if I didn't have to talk about this guy too. Steve, British, boxer, Nina's son. He's actually pretty cool. Lily is the daughter of a wealthy oil magnate from Monaco and is the archetypical rich girl. She even has a butler, Sebastian, who would go on to be a playable character. I've seen a lot of fighting games that have staged in Monaco, but I don't think any besides Tekken have characters, meaning this is one of those elusive, unique countries. From Germany is Leo. He fights with Baji Quan, meaning they carry on the tradition of non-Chinese characters fighting with Chinese martial arts. I don't think that's a bad thing. I just find it interesting and there's so many instances of that in this series. It's pretty neat. Anyways, everyone's favorite Naruto character, Lars Alexandersson, comes from Sweden, and his style is a basic karate. Usually when fighting games include non-Viking characters from Scandinavia, it'll be from Sweden, which makes sense, given it's the Scandinavian country with the highest population, and it has like IKEA and ABBA and stuff. So, a little unexpected for Tekken 6's protagonist and Naruto character to be from Sweden, but hey, unexpected is cool. From Spain is Miguel, a character, one of many, who wants revenge on Jin for causing World War III, don't ask, and fights with none. He just fights. From Italy, it's Claudio Serafino, the leader of an ancient order of exorcists, which fits given how much of this series is about devils, and it fits with Italy too, the Catholic-ass country. I love Italian fighting game characters so much. By the way, he comes from Tekken 7, and that game introduces a lot of new countries, thus forcing you to listen to my voice talk about useless things for just a little bit more minutes. Shaheen is a mercenary from Saudi Arabia with a strong sense of justice. The character Josie Rizal is from a unique country. It's happening again, another unique country. It's the Philippines. She uses a combination of kickboxing and eskrima, which is the national martial art of the Philippines, and it emphasizes sticks, knives, and improvised weapons. This is a little bit off track, but a fun fact about this sport is that, according to legend, it was practiced by natives of the Philippines under Spanish occupation under the guise of being practiced for stage plays. A similar origin story exists for the extremely cool capoeira, which was made by Brazilians under Portuguese occupation to make it, look like they're just dancing. I find that really neat. Tekken 7 also gives us the Muay Thai guy, finally, Fakumran. He is somehow more intimidating than Sagat, although not as tall as him, and he comes from Thailand as well. Finally, the last character who was added to Tekken, and who comes from a unique country, Lydia Sobieska. Someone on the Tekken 7 development team must really like Poland, because Lydia is a karate master and the Polish president, and became that at age 29. She survived an assassination attempt as a child and graduated from the university at the age of 16. The reason she joined the tournament in the first place was because Heihachi was stationing soldiers in Poland, World War III, and she told them to stop, to which Heihachi's response was, "Fight me, bitch." So she joined the tournament to do exactly that. Everything bad that has ever happened to Poland is balanced out by the existence of this one Giga Chad. Tekken 7 is interesting because it feels like they made a more deliberate effort to represent more unique countries that aren't in many fighting games. Hence, the Poland thing. Tekken's earlier days were mostly the opposite. They did have plenty of different countries, but they're more focused on connecting characters together, not introducing a whole bunch of different ones like Street Fighter did. They're also more interested in showcasing martial arts rather than countries specifically. Both approaches are still absolutely fun in my opinion, though. It's still pretty cool. Next, we're going to be talking about a series that doesn't have very many countries and doesn't even have that many characters from Earth, but it's still worth talking about due to how it takes a unique perspective on the concept of multiple countries. It also has a lot of unique ones. You also probably could have seen this one coming from the Bruce Lee clone Kombat 2. It's Mortal Kombat. Now here's the thing. I don't know Mortal Kombat that well. I've only played the original SNES trilogy. I fucking hated them. Yeah, maybe I just suck, but I derived absolutely no enjoyment from these games, and I never played any of them besides these original ones. They're just not fun. It's not just that I like newer games. I've been talking about 90s games for almost this entire time. I just hate these three specifically. That said, I looked up some of the countries of origin of Mortal Kombat characters, research, and I think they're pretty unique, and we're talking about it in this video. Apologize for not going too in-depth with Mortal Kombat lore, which I'm not as familiar with Street Fighter and Tekken. Who am I kidding? Mortal Kombat fans hate me already. Not many people in the Mortal Kombat series actually come from Earth. There are many realms in the series, so a lot of characters come from other worlds. But the main characters and face of the franchise, they mostly do come from Earth, and this is them I'm going to be talking about. Starting in Japan again, the generally agreed upon face of the series, Scorpion, comes from here. He's a ninja and part of an ancient clan of assassins, who uses lots of Japanese weaponry, and in many of the previous games he fights with martial arts that actually come from Korea or China rather than Japan, although in Mortal Kombat 9 he just fights with ninjutsu. Pretty cool depiction of a ninja. Funny that we have one for the one game here not made by a Japanese studio. By the way, there are lots of other characters who change up their martial arts as well, so I'm probably not going to be going over martial arts as much. Anyways, the other two Japanese characters are Kenshi, a blind swordsman, the coolest type of swordsman, who fights with a katana, and Shujinko, the old man protagonist of Mortal Kombat Deception, who fights with Shaolin Kung Fu. More non-Chinese characters using Chinese styles. Maybe Street Fighter was weird for not doing it. Okay. I guess I have to get to China now, because it is really heavily represented in the game, considering it's the place of origin of the series protagonist Liu Kang, the game's Bruce Lee clone. He's also a Shaolin monk. He even got a spin-off called Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, but officially he's cut ties with them. Why? Well, it's basically just so he can do cool, brutal fatalities with lots of blood when Shaolin monks don't allow killing. Having his gimmick that he never kills in Mortal Kombat would be cool, but whatever. His rival, Kung Lao, is similarly trained as a Shaolin monk, but fights differently due to Hat. Kung Lao also has a nephew named Kung Ling. He's here. Anyways, even more well-known than Liu Kang is Sub-Zero, another ninja coming from China. There were ninjas in China, by the way. It's cool. You should totally look it up after this. There are two Sub-Zeros, with the original one now known as Noob Saibot, and the current one is the rival to Scorpion. It's a bit of a complicated story. Anyways, this one dude named Sector is a cyborg from China and acts as a villain. Interestingly enough, one of the martial arts he can use is Sambo, the arm-breaking one from before. One of the primary good factions in the series are the Special Forces, and most of its members are from the USA. Sonya Blade comes from Austin, Texas, and is known for using military weapons like an American and Taekwondo. Jax is a wrestler who also uses guns and has a daughter named Jackie who's more of a kickboxer. And then there's Johnny Cage. He's proof that your Bobs are funny, but to make a real American character, not a foreign imitation of an American, you need Americans to put the American in American. Johnny Cage, everyone. He's an actor from the 80s, and this takes inspiration from a lot of older American action movies, which Japanese fighting games do to a degree, but not really in a way that makes you feel like the character could have actually been popular in the 80s. He has a daughter as well, Cassie Cage, who is one of the good guys too. Not all the Americans are on the Special Forces though. We got Aaron Black, an evil cowboy, Kai, another Shaolin monk, Stryker, who fights with military equipment before it was cool, and Nightwolf, a Native American shaman. Now at this point, this is where Mortal Kombat gets a little bit weird with nationalities, because we only have one more country before a bunch of unique ones, Australia. Kano and his right-hand man, Jarek, are both villains from Australia, with Kano being an infamous crime lord. Kano was actually originally Japanese-American until he had a Cockney accent in the Mortal Kombat movie, which people misinterpreted to be Australian, and it just stuck. Moving on to these unique countries, one country Mortal Kombat chooses to represent is Mongolia with Hu Hao. He's a wrestler and part of a Chinese organization, but he comes from Mongolia, meaning they probably just decided to do this to separate him from all the other Chinese characters or something. From the Czech Republic is a cyborg named Smoke, Prague specifically, the capital of the Czech Republic. A little strange that it's the only European country represented in the series through a character. Besides Greece, with Kratos, doesn't count. I couldn't really find a reason why, but it's cool. A little odd this character is even from Earth in the first place. Alright. It's, like I said, cool to represent unique countries in fighting games. I love it. And finally, the last character I'm talking about here, in this whole video, is one from Africa. And besides Egypt, African fighting game characters are pretty rare, and they tend to come all over the continent from whatever countries they just decide. Cyrex comes from Botswana. Botswana is a pretty obscure country, not the most obscure, but I feel like if you ask someone on the street to name 10 African countries, well, they wouldn't be able to name that many. But if you asked over and over, you'd probably not get Botswana. Who knows, maybe someone on the WTA came from Botswana, maybe they just threw darts at the map. It's just a little unexpected. That's what I meant by Mortal Kombat taking a unique approach. One that makes you question why they picked a specific country in the first place. But hey, kinda cool. He fights with ninjutsu and sambo, which sounds like if you combine those two, could be the coolest martial art ever. So, Mortal Kombat's approach to countries is to mostly put different factions, and these factions come from countries so that characters who come from them are those nationalities. And then, just for fun, some other heroes can be from different countries. It's definitely a valid approach, helps to make the lore a bit more sense why characters from so many countries are all together. In the end though, making a decision to put a nationality, a little flag on a character portrait, is something a lot of fighting games do. It helps make your game feel like it has more scale and depth, while also guiding players from all over the world who might want to play your game. I imagine an American kid might gravitate towards Ken or Guile when first starting up a game of Street Fighter 2, or a Filipino might check out Tekken due to having a character from their country. More than that though, when fighting game characters are handled respectfully and have a lot of care put into them, they can showcase art and culture in ways other games can't. It's small, a tiny detail to tell you where everyone is from, but it makes a huge difference. And to the genre as a whole, and to people individually. Because fighting games can be a true celebration of people, martial arts, and communities. And that's why I love them. Thanks for watching, I'll see you later.